The stars had been at war for 37 years. Pardoian remembered when the first news came to Earth. He was a young officer then, barely 26 years old. Now he stood as an admiral, his hair gray and his face lined with worry. He watched the stars through the observation window of Sol Orbital Command and wondered how much longer Earth could stay out of the fight. The war was between two great powers. The Veltan hegemony controlled the eastern spiral of the galaxy. They were tall creatures with hard shells covering their bodies like armor. Their eyes were compound, like insects, and they saw the universe as a place to conquer. The Asari Collective held the western regions. They were slender beings with silver skin that seemed to glow. They believed in order and control above all things. For 37 years, these two empires had burned worlds and killed billions. Humanity watched from the safety of their small corner of space and said nothing. They signed the Neutrality Doctrine in 2089, promising to stay out of all galactic conflicts. In return, both the Veltan and Asari agreed to leave Earth alone. It was a good deal. Or so everyone thought. Lieutenant Commander Yoon Ji-ai walked into the observation room. She was young, only 32, but her eyes held the sharp intelligence that made her one of the best tactical officers in the fleet. She carried a data tablet that glowed with red warnings. "Admiral, the situation is getting worse," she said. Her voice was calm, but Do-hyun could hear the concern beneath it. He turned from the window. "Show me." Ji-ai pulled up a holographic display. Stars floated between them, and red markers showed where battles had happened. There were many red markers. Too many. The Veltan lost 3 more systems last month, Ji-ai explained. The Asari are pushing hard. Intelligence reports say the Veltan are running out of resources, ships, soldiers, everything. Do-hyun studied the map with tired eyes. A dying empire is a dangerous thing. Yes, sir. Desperate powers do desperate things. He nodded slowly. The Veltan had always been the more aggressive of the two empires. They had looked at Earth with hungry eyes since first contact. Only the Neutrality Doctrine kept them away. But if they were losing the war, if they needed resources quickly, would a piece of paper stop them? "Double our patrol frequencies along the outer markers," Do-hyun ordered. "And get me a direct line to the assembly. The council needs to hear this." On Earth, far below the orbital station, Prime Counselor Baek Soo-jin stood before the United Nations General Assembly. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from every nation. Cameras broadcast her image to billions of people across the planet. Soo-jin was 60 years old, a diplomat who had spent her life talking to aliens and humans alike. She had helped write the Neutrality Doctrine. She believed in it with all her heart. Peace was possible. Humanity just needed to stay out of the darkness between the stars. "We have received reports of increased Veltan fleet movements," she said, her voice steady and strong. "Some have expressed concern that Earth may be in danger. I want to assure everyone that our treaties remain in place. The Neutrality Doctrine protects us." A representative from Japan raised his hand. "Counselor, what if the Veltan decide to ignore the treaty? What if they come anyway?" Soo-jin paused. It was a question she had asked herself many times in the dark hours of the night. But she could not show doubt. "Not here. Not now. The Veltan have honored our agreement for nearly 4 decades, she replied. "They have nothing to gain by attacking Earth. We are neutral. We offer no threat. We have no stake in this conflict, and we will continue to have no stake. Earth stays out of galactic wars. That is our policy. That is our protection." The assembly hall filled with murmurs. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked worried. Soo-jin kept her face calm and confident, but inside she felt the cold touch of fear. Far above Earth, in the cold emptiness of space, 12 Veltan warships moved in silence. They had jumped through hyperspace, far from the normal routes, avoiding detection. Their commander was Admiral Vrex, a veteran of 100 battles who had watched his empire crumble around him. Vrex looked at the blue and green planet growing larger in his view screen. Such a small world. Such soft creatures living on it. The humans had kept out of the war, hiding behind their treaties like children behind their mothers. They had factories, resources, workers, everything the hegemony needed to turn the tide of war. Admiral, one of his officers, said, "We are in position. All ships report ready." Vrex felt nothing as he looked at Earth. No guilt. No hesitation. War demanded sacrifice. If humans would not join willingly, they would join by force. One quick strike would break their spirit. They would surrender. They would serve. The hegemony would survive. "Target the major population centers," Rex commanded. "Show them what happens to those who have what we need." "Sir, they are civilians, non-combatants. The Galactic Conventions state that. The conventions mean nothing now." Rex turned his compound eyes to his officer. "We are fighting for survival. Begin the attack." 12 ships powered their weapons. Below them, millions of humans went about their lives, unaware that death was falling from the sky. Children slept in their beds. Families ate dinner together. Students studied for exams. Workers headed home after long days. None of them knew that in a few seconds, their world would change forever. The neutrality doctrine had promised safety. It had promised that staying out of the war would keep Earth protected. But paper promises meant nothing to desperate empires. And humanity was about to learn that lesson in fire and blood. The first beam of light came at 3:47 in the morning. Han Yunji was sleeping in her small apartment in Seoul when the world exploded around her. She woke to the sound of thunder that did not stop. The wall shook. Glass shattered. Then the floor disappeared beneath her, and she was falling through dust and fire and screaming darkness. Something hit her head. Everything went black. When she opened her eyes again, she was buried under broken concrete. Her ears rang with a high-pitched sound that blocked out everything else. Dust filled her mouth and lungs. She could not see. She could not breathe. Yoonji was 24 years old. She was a graduate student studying alien languages at Seoul National University. She was also a reservist in the Korean Defense Force, though she had never expected to use her training. Earth was neutral. Earth was safe. Earth was burning. She pushed against the rubble with all her strength. Her arms screamed with pain, but she did not stop. Survival was the only thought in her mind. Push. Breathe. Push again. After what felt like hours, she broke through to the surface. The city she loved was gone. Where tall buildings had stood, there were now only broken skeletons of steel and stone. Fires burned everywhere, turning the night sky orange and red. Bodies lay in the streets. Some were whole. Some were not. The smell of smoke and death filled the air so thick she could taste it. Yoonji tried to stand, but her legs would not work properly. She crawled instead, moving through the rubble toward the sound of crying. A child, somewhere nearby, a child was crying for its mother. She found the boy under a collapsed wall. He was maybe 5 years old, covered in dust and blood, but alive. His mother lay next to him, her eyes open and empty. Yoonji pulled the boy free and held him close. He screamed and fought at first, then went quiet, clinging to her like she was the only solid thing left in the world. "It's okay," she whispered, though she knew it was a lie. "It's going to be okay." Above them, the Velton ships completed their attack run and jumped back into hyperspace. The whole assault had taken 90 seconds. In that time, they had struck Seoul, Bisan, Daejeon, and dozens of smaller cities across the Korean peninsula. Energy beams had carved through buildings like knives through paper. 4 million people died before they could even understand what was happening. On the orbital station, Admiral Park Do-hyun watched the destruction in horror. The screen showed fire and death on a scale he had never imagined. His hands shook. His mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. Why? Lieutenant Commander Yoon-ji asked, her voice breaking. We were neutral. We stayed out of their war. Why would they do this? Do-hyun had no answer. There was no answer that made sense. They had done everything right. They had followed every rule. And still, the aliens had come to kill them. His communicator buzzed. It was Prime Counselor Baek Soo-jin, her face pale and drawn on the small screen. Admiral, she said, I am dissolving the neutrality doctrine. As of this moment, Earth is at war with the Velton hegemony. Understood, Counselor. I want every ship we have ready to fight. I want every soldier armed and prepared. An Admiral. Her voice hardened into something cold and sharp. I want them to pay for what they've done. Do nodded. For the first time in his long career, he felt something other than caution. He felt rage. The news spread across Earth within hours. Every screen, every phone, every radio told the same story. The aliens had attacked. Millions were dead. The age of neutrality was over. People reacted differently at first. Some cried. Some screamed. Some sat in shocked silence, unable to understand that the universe had changed in a single night. But as the hours passed and the full picture became clear, something else began to grow. Anger. Recruitment centers opened and were immediately overwhelmed. Young people and old people, men and women, lined up around the block to sign their names. They did not come because their government asked them to. They came because they had watched their cities burn and decided that someone would answer for it. Han Yoon-ji carried the orphan boy to a rescue station. Volunteers took him from her arms, promising to find any family he had left. She stood alone in the chaos, covered in dust and blood, and looked up at the sky. All her life, she had been taught that peace was the answer. Stay quiet. Stay small. Do not make the powerful angry. Earth had followed that wisdom for decades, and the powerful had come to kill them anyway. Never again, she said to no one. To everyone. To herself. She walked to the nearest military station and joined the line of volunteers. Her training was minimal. Her combat experience was zero. But she had survived the fire, and she carried the screams of the dying in her heart. The Velton had made a terrible mistake. They had studied human art and literature and history. They had seen the wars, the conflicts, the divisions that plagued the species. They concluded that humans were weak, easily frightened, quick to surrender. They had not understood what they were looking at. Those wars, those conflicts, they were not signs of weakness. They were signs that humans knew how to fight. They knew how to hate. They knew how to keep fighting long after any reasonable creature would have given up. The Velton wanted to break humanity with one strike. Instead, they had awakened something old and terrible. And now that something was looking up at the stars with hungry eyes. Deep beneath the Gobi Desert, where no satellite could see and no spy could reach, Dr. Cho Moran walked through a corridor that officially did not exist. She was 55 years old, a physicist who had spent her entire career working on things she could never talk about. Her family thought she designed communication systems. Her friends thought she worked in renewable energy. The truth was something else entirely. The corridor ended at a massive blast door. Moran placed her hand on the scanner and waited. The door hissed open, revealing a chamber the size of a football stadium, carved from solid rock a kilometer underground. Inside the chamber sat humanity's greatest secret. 12 warships, dark and angular, waited in launch cradles. They did not look like anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were not elegant like Osari vessels or smooth like Velton cruisers. They were ugly, brutal machines covered in armor and weapons. They looked like things built for one purpose only: killing. General Oh Junsu stood near the central command platform, watching the final preparations. He was a thin man with gray hair and the cold eyes of someone who had been preparing for disaster his whole life. "Dr. Cho," he said as she approached, "are we ready?" "The engines are fully operational," Moran replied. "Weapon systems are online. The crews have completed simulation training." She paused, looking at the ship she had helped create. 50 years of work. 50 years of pretending we were decades behind the rest of the galaxy. The secret had begun shortly after first contact with alien life. The government publicly announced that human technology was primitive compared to galactic standards. They said it would take centuries to catch up. They asked for patience and peace. It was all a lie. In truth, human scientists had been studying alien technology from the first day. They learned from captured samples, diplomatic gifts, trade goods. They reverse-engineered everything they could get their hands on. And they built in secret, preparing for the day when peace would fail. That day had come. Junsu nodded slowly. "Launch preparations will begin in 6 hours. The fleet will be operational within the week." "Will it be enough?" Moran asked. "It will have to be." 3 months later, the UEDF Dokdo rose from Earth's atmosphere for the first time. It was the lead ship of the new Gwanggaedo class, named after an ancient Korean king who had expanded his kingdom through military strength. The name seemed appropriate now. Captain Kwon Taeson stood on the bridge, feeling the slight vibration of engines powerful enough to push the ship faster than light. He was 38 years old, a former merchant marine captain who had hauled cargo between Earth and the lunar colonies. His sister had lived in Bizen. She had died in the first minute of the attack, vaporized along with her husband and 2 children. He had not smiled since that day. He did not expect to smile again for a long time. "All stations report ready, Captain," said his first officer. Lieutenant Commander Beek Yuri. She was young but steady, one of the best graduates from the emergency officer training program that had produced 10 years of candidates in just 3 months. "Navigation. Plot a course for the Kepler system," Taeson ordered. "Velton Supply Depot. Minimal defenses. Course plotted, sir." Taeson looked at his bridge crew. They were a mix of veterans and new volunteers, all united by loss and fury. Some had lost family. Some had lost friends. All had lost the illusion that Earth was safe. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship-wide communication system. "We did not start this war. The Velton came to our world uninvited. They killed our people without warning. They thought we would break. They thought we would kneel." He paused, letting his words settle. They were wrong. Today, we show them what humanity does to those who harm us. Today, we take the war to their door. Battle stations. The Dokdo jumped into hyperspace, followed by 11 other ships of the new fleet. They emerged in the Kepler system 47 hours later, catching the Velton completely by surprise. The supply depot was a space station the size of a small city, filled with fuel and ammunition and food for Velton warships. It had a defensive garrison of 8 patrol ships, barely enough to handle pirates. They were not prepared for what came out of hyperspace. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Human weapons cut through Velton shields like they were made of paper. Human ships moved faster and turned sharper than anything the Velton had expected. The patrol ships tried to fight back, but they were outmatched in every way. When it was over, the supply depot was a cloud of expanding debris. All 8 patrol ships had been destroyed. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. Taeson stood on his bridge, watching the destruction on his screens. He felt nothing. No satisfaction. No relief. Just a cold emptiness where his heart used to be. "Broadcast teams, are you ready?" he asked. "Ready, sir." "Begin transmission. All channels. All frequencies. I want every inhabited system in this galaxy to see what happened here." The footage went out across the stars. It showed the human fleet emerging from hyperspace. It showed the battle. It showed the complete destruction of the Velton Depot. And at the end, it showed a simple message, translated into every known galactic language. "Earth remembers. Earth is coming." In the Velton hegemony, commanders watched the footage with disbelief. These were the weak humans? These were the soft creatures who were supposed to surrender at the first sign of force? In the Asari Collective, diplomats studied the footage with growing unease. They had assumed humanity would be a minor player at best. Now they were not so sure. And on Earth, in recruitment centers and training camps and shipyards working around the clock, humans watched the footage and felt something they had not felt since the attack. Hope. The war had truly begun. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. In 6 months, human fleets had destroyed 47 Velton military installations. They had captured 12 warships. They had liberated 3 worlds that the Velton had conquered decades ago. And they showed no signs of slowing down. Sergeant First Class Im Hayok moved through the dark corridors of the captured Velton command ship, his rifle raised and ready. His squad followed behind him. 7 soldiers who had trained together and fought together until they moved like a single organism. The ship had surrendered after a brief battle, but there were still pockets of resistance. Velton soldiers who refused to give up. Hayok respected that, in a way. He understood fighting for your people, even when the cause was lost. But understanding did not mean mercy. "Contact left," shouted Private Shin Nari, opening fire down a side corridor. Hayok spun and added his own shots to hers. 2 Velton soldiers fell, their hard shells cracking under the impact of human weapons. The rest of the enemy squad retreated deeper into the ship. "Move up," Hayok ordered. "Watch your corners." They advanced room by room, clearing the ship with the careful patience that kept soldiers alive. It was slow work, but rushing got people killed. Hayok had learned that lesson early in the war when 3 members of his original squad had died in an ambush. He did not plan to lose anyone else. An hour later, they reached the command bridge. The doors were sealed, but the ship's systems had been damaged in the battle. Nari attached a breaching charge while the others took cover. The explosion blew the doors inward. The squad rushed through the smoke, weapons ready. Inside, they found a dozen Velton officers, most dead or dying. Only one was still moving, a high-ranking commander with golden markings on his shell. "Hold fire," Hayok said. He approached the wounded commander carefully. The alien's compound eyes followed his movements, showing no fear, only confusion. "Human," the commander said through his translator device. "Why do you fight like this?" Hayok knelt beside him. "Like what?" "Like demons. Like machines. We have fought many species. None of them." The commander coughed, dark blood leaking from cracks in his shell. "None of them fight like you. You do not stop. You do not tire. You do not negotiate. Why?" Hayok considered the question. He thought about his parents, who had died in the Bizan attack. He thought about his little brother, who had survived but would never walk again. He thought about the millions of ghosts that followed every human soldier into battle. "You came to our home," he said quietly. "You killed our families. You thought we would be easy prey." He met the alien's strange eyes without flinching. "You were wrong." The commander made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Yes, we were wrong. We looked at your history and saw division, weakness. We did not understand." His eyes began to dim. "You are not weak. You are patient. You wait until someone gives you reason to fight. And then, he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Hyok stood and turned to his squad. Medics are on the way. Secure the bridge and check for survivors. Any prisoners are to be treated fairly. Sarge? Nari looked surprised. After what they did? We are not them, Hyok replied. We fight hard, but we do not lose ourselves. Understood? The squad nodded. It was one of the principles that human commanders had established early in the war. Prisoners would be treated according to galactic conventions. Surrenders would be accepted. Civilians would be protected. Humanity would not become the monsters they were fighting. But those who refused to surrender found no mercy. Those who continued fighting were destroyed completely. The Velton learned quickly that humans made a clear distinction between enemies who fought and enemies who gave up. Choose to keep fighting, and you would die. Choose to surrender, and you would live. Many Velton soldiers began choosing to surrender. On the other side of the galaxy, Ambassador Ru Yan met secretly with representatives of the Osari Collective. The meeting took place on a neutral station, far from any battlefield. The lead Osari diplomat was called Severin. He was tall even for his species, with silver skin that reflected the light like a mirror. His face showed no expression, but Yenna had learned to read Osari body language. He was nervous. The collective is impressed by human military performance, Severin said carefully. You have achieved in months what we could not achieve in decades. Yenna smiled without warmth. We had good motivation. Indeed. Severin paused, choosing his next words with obvious care. The collective would like to propose an alliance. Together, we could end the Velton threat permanently. An interesting offer. Yenna leaned back in her chair. But I have a question. Where was the collective when the Velton attacked Earth? Where were your ships when 4 million of our people were dying? Severin's silver skin flickered slightly. Earth was neutral. We had no treaty. Exactly. Yenna cut him off. You had no treaty with us. You had no obligation. So you did nothing. You watched us burn and calculated how it might benefit your war. She stood, looking down at the seated diplomat. We do not need your alliance. We do not need your help. The Velton attacked Earth, and Earth will deal with them. When we are finished, you can have whatever is left. Ambassador, please understand. I understand perfectly. Yenna walked toward the door. The collective has fought this war for 37 years and gained nothing. We have fought for 6 months and brought the Velton to their knees. Perhaps you should ask yourself why that is. She left the Osari diplomat sitting alone, his silver skin now pale with something that looked very much like fear. Back on Earth, Admiral Park Do-hyun reviewed the latest battle reports with growing satisfaction. The Velton were retreating on all fronts. Their supply lines were broken. Their fleet was in ruins. Victory was no longer a question of if, but when. But Do-hyun did not celebrate. He remembered the faces of the 4 million dead. He remembered the burning cities and the screaming children. He remembered the price that humanity had paid for the galaxy's lesson. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Yoon Ji-ai entered his office. The council wants to know if we should begin planning for the final assault. Do-hyun nodded slowly. Tell them yes. It is time to end this. The final act was about to begin. The Velton homeworld was called Vraken. It was a beautiful planet, covered in vast forests and deep oceans, with 3 moons that filled the night sky with silver light. For 10,000 years, the Velton had built their civilization there, spreading out to conquer the stars. Now, 100 human warships hung in orbit above it, their weapons aimed at the cities below. Admiral Park Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the UEDF Sejong, the flagship of the Earth Fleet. He looked at the planet through the main view screen and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No triumph. Just a tired emptiness that had settled into his bones months ago. The war had lasted 18 months. 18 months of death and destruction across dozens of star systems. The Velton fleet was destroyed. Their colonies had surrendered. Their allies had abandoned them. Only the homeworld remained, and it had no hope of victory. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Commander Yoon-ji, "we are receiving a transmission from the surface. The Velton High Council wishes to discuss terms of surrender. Accept the transmission." The view screen flickered, showing the interior of what looked like a grand hall. A group of Velton leaders sat around the curved table, their compound eyes reflecting the lights above them. They looked old and defeated, nothing like the proud conquerors who had sent ships to burn Earth. The lead counselor spoke through a translator. "Admiral Do-hyun, we have authorized our military forces to stand down. We accept your demands for unconditional surrender." Do-hyun nodded slowly. "Your fleet will be dismantled. Your military leaders will face trials for war crimes. You will pay reparations to Earth and all worlds your empire has harmed. We understand, and you will understand this." Do-hyun's voice hardened. "Humanity did not want this war. We asked only to be left alone. You chose to ignore that request. You chose to murder millions of innocent people. That choice has cost you everything." The Velton counselor lowered his head. "We made a terrible mistake. We underestimated your species. Yes, you did. Make certain your children remember that mistake. Make certain they teach it to their children. Because if any Velton ever raises a weapon against Earth again, we will not stop at surrender." Do-hyun leaned forward. "We will make certain there is nothing left to surrender." The transmission ended. The war was over. 1 week later, Admiral Do-hyun addressed the Galactic Assembly. Representatives from dozens of species filled the Great Chamber, watching as the human commander walked to the central platform. He wore his dress uniform, covered in medals he had never asked for. The chamber fell silent as he began to speak. 37 years ago, humanity made first contact with galactic civilization. We were excited, hopeful. We thought we had found a community we could join, friends we could make, knowledge we could share. He paused, looking around the chamber. Instead, we found a galaxy at war. We found empires that saw other species as resources to be exploited. We found powers that cared nothing for justice or mercy or peace. And we decided to stay out of it. We signed treaties. We declared neutrality. We kept our heads down and hoped the darkness would pass us by. His voice grew harder. It did not. The Velton came to our world and killed 4 million people in 90 seconds. They did not warn us. They did not give us a chance to surrender. They simply decided that our resources were worth more than our lives. Do-hyun looked directly at the Asari delegation. They would not meet his eyes. Some of you watched this happen and did nothing. Some of you calculated how our suffering might benefit your interests. Some of you assumed we would be broken, and you waited to see what pieces you could pick up. He spread his hands. We were not broken. We came instead. We came with ships you did not know we had built. We came with weapons you did not know we had designed. We came with rage you did not know we could feel. The chamber was completely silent now. Humanity does not want your empires. We do not want your worlds. We do not want your wars. But understand this. The next species that brings violence to our door will find no restraint, no mercy, no end to our response. We will not stop at surrender. We will not stop at victory. We will make certain that no one ever again mistakes human patience for human weakness. He let the words hang in the air. This war is over. Let there be peace. But let there be understanding as well. Earth is no longer neutral. Earth is watching. And Earth remembers. He turned and walked out of the chamber. No one spoke until he was gone. 6 months later, Major Han Unji returned to Seoul. The city had been rebuilt. New towers rose where the old ones had fallen. Parks and gardens bloomed over places where thousands had died. Life had returned, stubborn and unstoppable, pushing through the ashes of destruction. Yoonji walked to the memorial wall in the center of the city. It was a massive structure, made of black stone, covered with the names of the 4 million dead. Flowers and photographs and candles surrounded it, left by families who would never stop mourning. She found her parents' names near the middle of the wall. Kim Yoonji and Han Dongwoo. They had been school teachers, gentle people who had believed in education and kindness. They had died in their apartment, probably in their sleep, never knowing that death was falling from the sky. "We did it," she whispered, touching their names. "We made them pay for what they did." An old woman approached, moving slowly with a cane. She placed a small bundle of flowers at the base of the wall, then looked at Yoonji with tired eyes. "You were in the war?" the old woman asked. "Yes. Did we win?" Yoonji thought about the question. She thought about the battle she had fought, the friends she had lost, the things she had seen that would never leave her memories. She thought about the price humanity had paid for survival. "We survived," she finally said. "The Velton will never threaten us again. No one will threaten us again. Not for a long time." The old woman nodded slowly. Was it worth it? All that death. All that pain. Yoonji looked up at the sky. It was blue and clear, with white clouds drifting lazily across it. Somewhere up there, human ships patrolled the borders of Earth space. Somewhere up there, the stars that had once seemed so threatening now held a different meaning. "They thought we would break," she said quietly. "They thought we would kneel. They learned that humanity does not kneel." She turned back to the memorial wall, to the names of the dead, to the price of that lesson. "And now everyone out there knows it too." The old woman placed a hand on Yoonji's arm, a gentle touch of understanding. They stood together in silence, two survivors of a war they had never wanted, looking at the names of those who had not survived. Above them, the sun shone down on a world that had learned the hardest possible lesson about the universe. It was not a kind place. It was not a safe place. Peace was not guaranteed by treaties or good intentions. But humanity had also learned something about itself. When pushed, when threatened, when their homes were burning and their children were dying, humans did not give up. They did not surrender. They fought with everything they had until the threat was destroyed. The galaxy had learned that lesson too, and they would not forget it for a very long time.